Okay. So let yourself comfortable in the chair and start off with just a few moments to settle in, to reflect on your posture, and give yourself a chance to settle and to arrive. So think about the details of your posture, feet flat on the floor. Try and keep them hip width apart as you would do when you're standing. You're familiar with the standing posture. And you can see I'm quite a long way forwards on my chair at the moment. You can do that without straining your back. Then just for a couple of minutes perhaps. This is, I suppose, in some ways the ideal posture because you can really get a sense of your feet being part of the movement. But it is a strong posture on your back. So if it starts to ache or tighten up, then sit back a little bit until you feel that there's better support for your spine. So your legs, feet, hips, supporting your upper body. And particularly with that slight angling forwards that we make to get some of the weight in our feet, feeling that the front of your body is hanging from your back, so the back's supporting the front. And as always, if you can get a sense for the big bones of your feet, your legs, spine itself, pelvis, ribs, providing the kind of inner structure that gives you your shape, your alignment, and is the sort of source of the strength. Then rubbing your hands together. Tapping over your face. Over your head and neck. Down to one shoulder. And then arm. And on the other side. Upper part of your chest. Right on your belly. And your legs. Now extend your feet. Sit back in your chair as though you're sitting back in a deck chair. Take a couple of slow, gentle breaths. Just looking to allow yourself to sink into the chair. Not as easy as it sounds. Now very carefully and very gently, just sort of deliberately tighten your shoulders a bit. So tighten them up and then let them relax suddenly. So it's like tighten and release. Notice how you sort of drop back into the chair quite a lot. Well, it feels as though you do. This is the feeling we want to get used to. You could do the same thing in your hips and your back, maybe include your shoulders as well. So this is the feeling that we call releasing or letting go. And even when we're sitting back in the chair and we're fully sort of sinking into the chair, the feeling of releasing includes the feeling of dropping. So you're not necessarily dropping back a long way, there'll be a certain amount of that, but the feeling is it sort of belies the smallness of the actual physical movement. So now come back up to the first position, finding a good place in the chair for you to rest. Try the same thing again, shoulders, hips, back, whatever, just tightening up and releasing. So this time, as you drop, you get caught, you drop into the chair, of course, but you also get a sense of dropping inwards towards again, your skeleton. So we begin to realize that we hold a great deal of tension, a great deal of tightness in muscles of our back and our shoulders and lots of places in the body. It will vary from person to person, but we don't actually need that. Tension is developed for various reasons, but one of the key reasons is a kind of assumption that we have to hold ourselves up. That may be reinforced by something postural, so we have to take that into account. We only really start to find that out when we start to get that feeling of releasing with a degree of confidence that we're not going to release and just kind of collapse. So we know the chair is there, we know the floor is there, but we get to know this kind of inner strength that radiates out from the area of our skeleton. This is an important aspect of Tai Chi. Those old habits of tightening and stepping in will come back in very, very quickly. So we just get used to this regular process of releasing. Some people associate it with our breathing. You could try the same thing again. Take a gentle breath in, and then you release with a kind of almost kind of a hard sigh. You breathe in and so on and so forth. So there's various processes, various sensations in our body that we begin to get used to that lead us in to this softening, releasing process, which is part of what's meant by the term sum in Chinese, a term that's often simply translated as relax. So now as you start to turn, you start to turn your head, we bring in another factor, because again, we've often developed habits of movement that involve us straining to move. And once again, there may be real reasons for that. It could just be a habit we've picked up. Sometimes you can find yourself sort of in a room with people and somebody goes to get up and the person you go, oh, I better get up. Oh, I need to do. It's almost like a kind of cultural thing that builds up. Other times it might be, maybe you've had an injury or a condition that's made movement difficult. And so you've had to, so maybe you've still got it. So don't just dismiss it as something useless or something that is simply in the way. There are reasons why it's there. And then your shoulders. But what we try and do is to find the path of least resistance. And that overlaps with this quality of sum, the releasing feeling. Because when we meet a barrier of one kind or another, what we want to try and do is get a sense of flowing around it or over it somehow. Like water when it runs downhill and bumps into a rock. Going forwards. Hands down to yourself. So one thing that we can do, and we don't necessarily want to do this all the time, and sometimes it might not be appropriate. But say I turn my hands to here, and I feel a tightening in my shoulders. Sometimes, if I can get a sense of releasing in my shoulders, my hands will just open a bit more. I say sometimes it's not an infallible technique. As I said, there's a multitude of reasons, but it would always be the first thing that we try. What we might realize in the process of doing that is that there is something structural that we need to correct before we're able to properly release. So there's a whole process of investigation and understanding that we can begin to use the practice to help us with. And then winding around. You practice this, it will become second nature to you, to just look for that feeling of releasing at the point where we meet resistance, and then back the other way. Let your hands rest. Now, tilt forwards so that your weight goes in more into your feet, and then push back. So with this exercise, focus on your legs. As you go forwards, more of your weight goes in to your legs. And you may notice that even in the chair, you resist that process. This will be particularly noticeable, I think, if, say, for instance, you've got a bit of arthritis in your knees, there's always an impulse to kind of tighten up around them, to sort of protect them. That can have a short-term benefit, but in the long term, it's not going to help, because what it does do is put more pressure on your knees. What we want to try and do, and it's very difficult to do, is to just soften, get that feeling of releasing around the knee joint as we move our weight forwards. You might want to just focus your attention on one knee, or it might be your ankle or something like that. I'm just using knees as a common example. And when we do this in the chair, it's a good way of developing this practice. If you're standing, we want to do the same thing again when, for instance, you transfer your weight. However, it's a lot more difficult because there are added factors. There's more of the weight being used when you're standing, of course. And there's always that sort of risk that something might collapse. And that's a very reasonable concern. Don't think, oh, I mustn't do that. Sometimes it's said, oh, it just relaxes, as though that were easy. But you want to make sure that you're doing it correctly. So this is a good way to practice the idea. If, for instance, I twist this knee in here, so if my knee's out of line with my toe and I go to do it, I meet a barrier very quickly. If I relax it this way, if I try and soften the knee, I'm actually pushing the knee out more. It's an example of something we want to avoid doing. And so, we have to be aware of things like our structure, our alignment. Much easier to investigate, in many ways much safer to investigate in the chair. And what I'm talking about with the knees could apply anywhere in your body, but we've got a priority on what's happening in hips and legs. And when you turn toward one knee. The turn is in the center of your body. And then turning the other way. Then round in a circle, your weight goes forwards, you turn a little bit in your hip, bring the weight to the other leg, sit back, bring the weight to the hip on that side, turn to move the weight across It's almost like your pelvis is rolling around on the chair, and your spine is just floating in your back. Don't move too far. If you go out there, of course, you will have to stiffen up to stop yourself falling out of the chair. Almost like somebody's massaging your back. Change direction. One more time. And then pull up one knee, extend your leg out, plant the foot down and back. Goes heel, toes. And part of that planting is just a gentle pressure downwards with this feeling of releasing in the sole of your foot. And then on the other side. So this process, if you like, think of it like that, as of releasing, becomes a kind of constant background to everything that we do, almost like one of these many little programs we get going on in our computer that we never see working, but without which the computer doesn't work. So I've emphasized it because we want to get to a point where we have to think about it, basically, where it happens, this becomes part of the ordinary way that we move, not just in the exercises, but in our daily lives. So now hands down to your sides, turning your hands palm forward as much as possible, combining the rotation in your arms with movement of your weight. This is bird folds its wings. This forward point, leave your hands facing back. As you come back, just let them swing down, swing up a little bit. It's fisherman castanet. One of the images that we often use in Tai Chi is that it's as though you're moving through water. And if I did this and I was in water, my hand was stiff. I'd meet a lot of resistance. If I get that releasing feeling in elbow, wrist, the joints of the fingers in particular, then my passage through the water will be much smoother. In the process of doing that, if you've got a, if you've avoided going swimming for a while and then you go for a little swim, you'll ache a lot because although you've been releasing the big muscles and the big sort of mobilizing muscles in the water, you've actually been engaging much more of the body. So you will feel it. And the similar process in Tai Chi, that as we get that feeling of releasing, the sensation of the movement, the energy flowing much more deeply in the body. One more time. The next time you come forwards, going into rolling the ball. really right from this forward position, the hips begin to release and drop back, then your shoulders. Another way of thinking of this is to use the term yielding, also related to that term song, to actually allow gravity to work through your body, not resisting it, not fighting against it. When we do that, we realize that actually it's that which allows us to get that sense of a compression in lower back, hips, buttocks, and legs that, like, pressing on a balloon or a ball, will eventually just push you back. Now turn your hands palm in. Reduce rotator weight. We gradually extend the range of our movement, build the quality, the flow of the movement. And this process of song is a really key part of that. This time, leaving your hands hip width apart, coming back, elbows still go out a little bit, push and wave. So both in the returning movement and the pushing out, there's the image of water again, one way or another. You start to feel that stronger movement beginning to come through. And then, as your hands come back this time, roll them into a hollow fist. And as far to palm up as you're comfortable, and then as you go forwards, rotating down. Don't let your elbows stick out with this. So it's not that big a movement. Your arms are only sort of doing that really. The rest of the movement comes from the transfer of your weight. Don't let your elbows drift behind your shoulder. So this is a good example of the phrase that I've used often, which is that the movement is rooted in the feet, directed through the center of your body, transmitted through your legs, expressed in your arms. Do one more. Open your hands, turn out. pressing. One more. Coming back, when you reach the rear position, turn your hands over and then resting on the table, just polishing the table. Combining extension forwards and backwards with a turn, and then change direction. Change again. One more time. Coming around, coming back to this central position, turning your hands palm up. Without losing that quality of yielding, press down gently through feet and hips, so the movement rising up through your back and upper body, pushing your hands up and pressing down. One more time. Following the same pattern within the body, almost. Hips are doing the same, feet are doing the same. We're going into the wild goose. One more. And a slight shift forwards to allow your hands to swing in front of your knees. And then back into your hips to push up, parting the clouds. Sinking into your hips, waiting for the push up. One more. And then dragon plucks the stars from the sky. With that extension through one side and the contraction So now, both hands together. Take your time in the changeover. Bring them around. Bring your hands around in front of your belly, and then with the expansion, pressing up a little. And down. And pushing out. And back. This is a good exercise for doing various things. One of the important things is that we let our attention come back to the center of our body. And this too is something connected with Sung. It's as though we release ourselves from the burden of having to think out there. We just come back to this area of Sung, which is the area that's sinking towards the ground, or the principal area. So we can also have a physical location for that process of Sung, or at least a physical destination, I suppose you could say. Another thing that comes through clearly, I think, with this exercise is the sense of rhythm. There's an expansion and a contraction. Expansion and so just finishing off with this one, and at the end of the movement, we expand, extend one foot. There's a sort of contraction forwards and downwards into scooping the sea, looking at the sky, and expanding in the front of your body. It's not that necessarily that straightforward. I mean, here, front of the body contracts, the back expands, yin to yang, and then the back contracts and the front expands. So the previous exercise, much more straightforward in many ways, I think, to get a sense for that rhythm and how Sung is very much a part of that process. But once we start to develop the rhythm, we start to feel a sense of continuity, of flow in the movements. And also, we begin to realize that it's not just a part of the body that is actively moving, but our whole body is sort of part of the rhythm of yin yang in one way or another. As I say, with this exercise, it's not quite as straightforward as the previous one, but you get to recognize the signs. Your hands drop down, grasping the tiger's ears. And then on the other side, scoop in the sea, looking at the sky. Changing now to grasping the tiger's ears. bringing the feet back. Let your weight settle into your right hip, buttock, and just release there for a moment, and then feel the push. And direct it across to your left leg. And again, just releasing, and as the push comes, letting it take you back. Then you turn, and now go over to your right, releasing in the hip and so on, and then forwards to your right leg and back. Right, again, right hip to left foot. Back, turn to go across, and left to left, right to right side. Now come across into your right, hold the ball, right hand on top, left hand underneath, go forwards, and as you go into your left leg, turn, let that just extend your arm out. But here, don't just go to here, so think, oh, what have I got to do next? Look, see how, I'm exaggerating a bit, but sung all the way through that side of your body, down into the ground, and see how my arm responds to that. And then you feel the push and you come back. And once again, sung, just complete the movement. Go across and complete the movement. And then part the wild horse's mane to the right. To here, feel a sense of completeness. I sometimes liken those moments of what I sometimes refer to as settling in as being a bit like those times when you're about to go out the house, you put a coat on, and before you open the door, you just sort of like shuffle into your coat. You turn the collar down or something like that. They become quite automatic after a while, and it just makes sure that we don't lose this quality of stillness, because we've had to bring our attention back, and rather than going through straight into the next movement with a bit of a jerk, we've just got a little bit of time and space through this process of stillness. One more time. And then rest. So we use this awareness of things like sun and where our weight is, and even, to be honest, the awareness of the resistance to the weight sinking and so on and so forth, as ways of just applying a sort of a break to the movement. It's very easy, particularly with something like Park the Wild Horses. Oh, I'm going to go here, and I see more errors that people make in a complicated movement like that, by people rushing, by thinking they have to do more, rather than by people just taking that moment. So it's a valuable tool when we're trying to learn and when we're trying to improve a movement. And it also has this quality of, as I've mentioned many times before, allowing us to access this quality of stillness that exists within the movement. It's that the movements are unhurried, or we try to make the movements unhurried. But it's not enough just to say that as a rule. We often need something to kind of hang our attention on, to stop it bouncing around all over them. So now, once again, rubbing your hands together. Tapping over your face. over your head and neck. Down to one shoulder. And your mouth. The other side. Off the chest. Your belly. And your legs. Push your heels up a few times just to get the blood circulating back through your legs before we stand on them. And then around in the circle. And back the other way. And standing. So we can look at this quality of swing in the standing as well. Always be aware that it's not going to work every time. You're not going to get it right every time. There's a process of trial and error. So particularly when we're standing, I think it's important that we have some support. You could use just use the chair. I'm actually going to move the chair out of the way. I'm just going to put my hand on the wall for that little bit of extra support. The basic stance is feet hip width apart, the weight coming forwards a little bit, hips dropping back, and that process of the hips dropping back is the process of Sung. But again, shoulders, back, hip, those kind of areas, tense up and release, tense up and release. Now, assuming you've got your posture correct, and as I say, no, we don't always, then what will happen is you go straight down and into your legs. But suppose, for instance, I'm going to come forward. Suppose, my shoulders back. This is exaggerated. Most people wouldn't have this. But now I shall tense up and release, and I fall over because I haven't got the alignment. Which is why I say, use something to support. Because it's not meant to be a test and it's not meant to be graded or anything like that. It's really just to, again, remind us of what this quality of Sung feels like, because it's Sung takes us into the posture. So if I sometimes refer to this posture as central equilibrium. The image is the mountain. The pathway to the mountain is through Sung. So there's something that we're constantly kind of working on in Tai Chi. So letting your hips sink down and push up. Now we also realise, and I did mention this in the chair, I think it's more obvious, much more clear standing. So if you could get it in the chair with its subtlety, this will come very straightforward. But it's that allowing ourselves to sink that leads to the push up, like bouncing a ball. If you drop a ball down, it will bounce up. If you place it on the floor, it won't do. So there's a certain that give leads to the upward energy, and then bringing your arms into the movement, pushing up and sinking down, keeping your hands quite close to your body. Just going to move the chair out the way before I bump into it. Now change into the wild goose, and again, come up to the top of the wild goose, rest there for a moment. Notice that my elbows are sinking down. I'm going to come close. My hands will disappear slightly, but again, I'm going to exaggerate something. Sung, knees and hips start to soften. this happens. When the hips start to do that, the rib cage will soften. When the rib cage softens, the shoulders soften, elbows, and back a bit. So knees, hips, rib cage, shoulders, elbows, and then the arms. And in a way, as we push up, particularly in the upper part of the body, Sung is still operating, because what we want is for the upper body to be able to receive the energy of the push up into the fingers. And then part in the clouds. One more time. Okay, and shake out. Okay, so 1 foot forwards, hip width across your feet about the same in length, and begin to transfer your weight. Now again, we want to think about Sung, we want to think about that releasing quality, but remember what I was saying about the kind of hazards around this. We need to be careful in the chair, not nearly so much potential pressure on knees and things like that. Again, you can use the wall for a little bit of support, but for instance, here, I'll come closer so you can see more clearly. My toes are pointing straight ahead, that front knee is pointing straight ahead. But what if, for some reason, there's a habitual turn in my knee, and this happens? Now, I'm exaggerating that. You can see my knee's pointing over there somewhere, my toes are pointing there, and I think, oh, I've just got to release. And if I release in my hip, more pressure goes on my knee. So go carefully with this. We're looking to get maybe 60% of the weight into the front leg eventually, maybe as much as 70 into the back leg, but you might need to build it up. You know, just a little bit of weight. Can you just get that feeling of release? This is not some kind of catchphrase where we can just say, do this and everything's fine. That's why I try to avoid the use of the term letting go. I think it oversimplifies it in a way. But it is a very good technique. You can start to get to a point where instead of your weight catching in your knee, and so your knee becomes weight bearing, you gradually learn to let the weight go through the knee. So there's a movement through the knee, but not a holding. Or whichever joint we're talking about, whichever part of the body you're talking about. I just use knees as a fairly obvious example. So this is an ongoing process. You know, it's not something to say, oh, I'll just let go and everything will be fine. It's not going to work that simply, I'm afraid. And you know, I'm not just talking about the knee. You could, you know, to release in the knee, you may find that you need to release in the back. What you might do is release in your lower back or your hips, and suddenly realize there's more pressure on your knee, and so on and so forth. So your awareness of what is going on in your body is really important here. But eventually we get to a point we can get 70% weight back. Say you raise the front toes, more of the weight now goes in. And when you go forwards, you push the back knee forwards and more of the weight goes in. You're looking for a feeling of alignment over the leg. and the feeling of your weight flowing down through the leg, rooting down. So this can lead us to a point where our habitual response to a little bit of pressure, whether that be the pressure of the weight or in our daily lives, you walk outside, there's a bump in the pavement, and you trip or you slip or something like that, and we release in that sense. We allow our center of gravity to drop. In the sort of those daily life situations, it doesn't have to look good. It doesn't have to be sort of like great Tai Chi in the sense of, you're all on one leg or something like that. It could be as simple as you have a little trip and it's like, oh, the other foot will come in. We wouldn't normally do that in Tai Chi, but it doesn't matter, does it? Because the point is you're still upright at that point. So we're using this exercise, and it's a difficult thing to do, to really develop this quality of Sung, so that it's something that is a useful tool for us in our daily lives. And then stepping in. So if you can do this without putting the foot down, if you're comfortable with that, that's good. You always have the option on putting the foot down. As I say, if I was walking along the road and I slipped, I wouldn't try and stand on one leg and do a Tai Chi posture. I'd just be wanting not to fall. And I would do whatever I needed to do to prevent that. But Sung would be an important part of the process. So try on the other side. Feet hip width apart, about the same in length. Just beginning the transfer of your weight. Where is the resistance that you would like to release? Sometimes you might find, and I'll be talking about the joints, you go forward, the muscle tightens, you release the muscle, it doesn't come back. Other times there's a longer term thing there. So there isn't a kind of A to B to C type formula here. This is why I call Sung a process. And then raising your toes and your heel. Stepping in. And take a few steps through, either forwards or backwards. And then change direction. And change. Have your right foot forwards. Move your weight into your front foot. Turn a little bit, let that turn. Push your arms up. Bring your foot in, the rear foot, or your front foot. You might want to do this going back, because I'm going to go forwards. I'm going to step through. Plant the foot down, move the weight in. Same thing here, bringing the foot in and step. Now that I've done it a couple of times, I'm confident in my alignment. I'm going to try to see if I can just raise my knee and step. As I raise my knee, I'm focusing a lot on my hips dropping backwards, like a seesaw. Hips drop back, pushing the knee up. And change direction. Really all through the body, feet to fingertips. Sung is an ongoing process. It's not the only one, but it is a very crucial one. If, for instance, I get to here and I stiffen up in my shoulders, that will happen. And bring your feet parallel. And stand again for a moment. A sense of that inner structure of your body, the bones, the skeleton, the surrounding area, and having some confidence in that really aids releasing. It's hard to let go if you're not sure what you're letting go into. Okay, go back to your chair. Embrace Tiger Return to Mountain, our partner exercise, really emphasizes this process of return. And I think it acknowledges that we don't employ Sung the whole time, but we can come back to it. Remember, I said the pathway to the mountain is Sung, this releasing feeling. Just sit and feel again that support from within your body as well as from your legs and hips and from the chair floor. Let your hands drop down. Push out here. Then bring your hands around into a circle. As you do, feel your hips release and then your shoulders, then your elbows. And notice how that just brings you back to this original position. And then we can start again. Hips beginning to release, to yield to the pull of gravity, shoulder blades, shoulders, wherever else you happen to feel it. And whatever else you feel. One more time. And rest. Lovely. Thank you very much again, as always. So